Man, did Elliot knock it out of the park in the month of May. Man, good gracious. If you did not get a Meant for More book on the way out today, you need to stop by the atrium and pick one of those up because what he wasn't necessarily able to cover everything that he has in the book during the sermons, there's a lot more information in the book. So please be sure to pick one of those up on your way out today. You know, there is good news in the Gospels. The Gospels record the fulfillment of the promises of the Old Testament, the promise of the cross, the promise of the resurrection. Those 39 books of the Old Testament find their fulfillment in the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as they record the greatest life ever lived. And the Gospels are not just biographies, they are testimonies. They are witnesses. The Gospels record Jesus' mission, and it's really twofold. The first part of his mission was to reveal the Father to us, and the second part of that mission was to redeem us to the Father. So to reveal the Father to us and to redeem us to the Father. Now, in regards to revealing the Father to us, Jesus came to show us the heart of God, the heart of his Father. Now, when you read through the Old Testament, you may think that God is distant, that God is angry all the time, that God is, not approachable, that he is unavailable. However, that is not accurate. And so when Jesus came and when God put on flesh in the form of Jesus, he revealed the truth that God actually is who he says he is. God is love. Jesus declared the heart of the Father by showing us the heart of the Father. In John chapter 14, verse 9, Jesus said this, "He who has seen me has seen the Father. He who has seen me has seen the Father." So in this new sermon series that we're in, I want you not just to see the heart of God, the heart of Christ. I want to encourage you to develop the heart of Christ. I want to encourage you to allow the Holy Spirit to grow the heart of Christ in you. I don't want to just give you more knowledge. I don't want to just give you more trivia facts so that you can, win at Trivial Pursuit. I want you to really examine these characteristics of Jesus' heart as he reveals the heart of his Father. Today, we look at Jesus who had a heart that touches. Remember the movie The Untouchables? Now, there were several makes of it, but the one I'm thinking about is Kevin Costner's The Untouchables, but it all portrays the same thing. The movie portrays the lives of individuals, men and women, who were untouchable because they lived their lives, they operated above the payoffs, above the payouts in the city of Chicago. Now, in the first century, in Jesus' day, there were a whole group of untouchables, and it had nothing to do with living above the payouts of Jerusalem or Bethlehem or Nazareth. These untouchables carried a disease that had deep physical, deep emotional, mental, relational, and spiritual ramifications. These individuals were called lepers. And a leper embodied everything that went wrong in the human condition. Everything bad in the human condition was seen in the life of a leper. They were marked by a disease that screamed heartache. They were marked by a disease that screamed despair and brokenness and loneliness. Lepers were outcasts. Now, there was not just physical realities, there were spiritual realities that were attached to being a leper. The loneliness resulting from those realities was even talked about in great detail in the law of Moses. And we know the power of loneliness. We can look back over the last 18 months in the United States, in the world, and we see the power of loneliness, and people died of loneliness. It's a very powerful, real reality. Well, leprosy was a very isolating condition. It was a condition that was a living death. It was a slow decaying of the body. Appendages would fall off or wear off because there was no sense of feeling. There was no sense of restraint, which is a pretty powerful picture of sin, isn't it? In Israel, it was all about ceremonial purity. If you wanted to have access in the temple, you had to be ceremonially pure. If you wanted the benefits of the sacrificial system, you had to be ceremonially pure. But leprosy was a painful pathway to ceremonial impurity. And in the law of Moses, there were 61 defilements that were listed. And only out of those 61, only one was worse than touching a leper. And that was touching a dead body. The Jews actually referred to leprosy as, quote, the finger of God, unquote. Leprosy was the finger of God. That's how they referenced it. That's how they understood it. You see, they believed that punishment of leprosy was from God and only God could cure it. Now remember Miriam, Moses' sister? She was struck by God with leprosy because she led a rebellion against her brother's leadership, Moses. And God struck her with leprosy. She was kicked outside of the camp. She lived out there for 7 days until God healed her, and she was reunited with her family and her friends. Leprosy was inflicted by the finger of God. Leprosy was removed by the finger of God. Now, when we have symptoms of illness, where do we go to? Whose advice do we seek? Whose help do we seek? Now, if you're not stubborn like me, you would go to a doctor, okay? But I tend to be stubborn. For the last 3 weeks, I've been fighting this cough. It's an allergy cough, but Susie's been after me. You need to go to the doctor. You need to go to I know what they're going to say. It's an allergy cough, okay? It's not COVID. I've been vaccinated. I'm not in the 5%. It's an allergy cough. I know I don't need to go to the doctor, but I want you not to follow my pattern. I want you to do as I say, not as I do in this situation. If you have trouble, if you have an illness, go to a doctor. Okay, I'm going to Dr. Tedrick. He's got it under control. But what's interesting is because of the spiritual implications of leprosy, the Israelites were not instructed to go to a doctor. They were instructed to go to a priest. And the priest would diagnose the problem. And if it was leprosy, everything was taken away. A person with leprosy would lose access to their job. They would lose their access to their family. They would lose their place in the synagogue. They would lose their access to the community. You talk about a quarantine, they were quarantined. And a leper's diagnosis was exacerbated emotionally and mentally and relationally and spiritually because everywhere they went, if there were ceremonially clean people around, they had to yell, unclean, unclean, everywhere they went. You talk about humiliation. That would have been, I would have liked to have been able to crawl in a hole somewhere had I had leprosy, but if you had to crawl out of that hole, you had to announce it to everybody that you were leprous. And in addition to that, the leprous person had to face this walking death sentence all by themselves. It was awful. Leprosy created a whole different type, a whole different group of untouchables. But Jesus encountered one particular leper who was in desperation. There was a desperate moment in this leper's life. We read about this in Mark chapter 1. We'll start with verse 40. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Now, Jesus had just finished the Sermon on the Mount. He had come down from the mountainside, and the crowd followed. This leper was probably not a part of the crowd, but he was waiting for Jesus to come down that mountain, and with a desperate heart, he finds Jesus. He's covered with leprosy. Now, when you harmonize the gospel accounts together, you will discover that this leper is in the middle of this crowd. So he is openly violating the law of Moses, apparently, just being in this crowd. But his misery drove him to Jesus. When has your misery driven you to Jesus? Now, I know if we were honest with one another, there's been some of us, maybe in our misery, we were driven to the bottom of a bottle, or we were driven to abuse drugs, or we were driven to an immoral lifestyle, or we were driven to a self-help book or a counselor. But when has your misery driven you to the great physician who is the help that we need? That's where we should go. And that may be to a counselor, that may be to a book, but why wouldn't we start with taking our misery to Jesus? You see, this leper, even though it's very early in Jesus' ministry, he has faith in Jesus. He must have heard the amazing stories. I mean, about this wonder worker, about this miracle worker, about this Nazarene that's just doing amazing things, that's removing demons and healing the blind and restoring sight, and the deaf and the dumb are able to hear and to speak. I mean, he must have heard. And so he lays himself, he falls before Jesus, and he begs Jesus. Now, if I were to demonstrate what that probably looked like, you probably would get a little uncomfortable. Why? It's because, man, we're Americans and we don't beg. We're independent. We're a superpower. Superpowers don't beg. Superpowers don't plead. We don't ask help from nobody. We got this. And so if I came right down there and I fell at your knees, at your feet, and I started begging you and pleading you, you'd be like, what kind of church is this? Because we don't do that. But this man did that. He humbled himself. He begged, he pleaded with Jesus to heal him. It was an act of worship. It's a picture of worship. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to remember the culture that this leper is from. This man is from the culture that says leprosy is the finger of God, given by God and removed by God. So this leper is declaring his confidence that Jesus can do that which only God can do. Jesus can take away leprosy. So what is this man saying? This man is saying Jesus is God. And you want to know what? He's right. Now, you guys kind of like that, so we'll just do that again. Jesus is God. Doesn't that feel good? Well, Jesus provided a healing word and a healing touch to this man. Let's look at our next couple verses. Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Wow. Compassion challenges us to feel what people feel and to go through the pain and the hurt that people are hurting and they lose a loved one, and that grief, that's what compassion makes us stronger because we unite together. We say it around here like we're in this together, but that's what compassion does. And Jesus encountered the human condition with all its ugliness, and he did it with a heart of compassion. How did Jesus respond to this leper? Did he say, Pete, I need double masked? I need 2 masks before I get close to it. No, he didn't say that. Did he say, James, hey, give me double gloves before I touch the man? I'm going in. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say, John, I need a hazmat suit. Just get me donned, get me outfitted before I touch him. No, he didn't do any of that. He didn't have pity on the man and then recoil back in shock. Jesus' compassion engaged the man's pain where he was hurting. And you can see Jesus probably even bending down while the man was begging and reaching out and just touching the man. Jesus actually placed himself in a position that the crowd would look at, that Jesus is getting ready to become ceremonially unclean because he touched the leper. He reached out and that may be actually the most important part of this whole entire story, is that Jesus actually touched a leper. Jesus had unlimited ways of healing. I mean, there were times that Jesus healed when he was nearby, and there was times when Jesus healed from far away, and then there was times when Jesus healed by word, and there was other times that Jesus gave a small task, a rather meaningless task to do, and the person was healed. But here he touches the man to provide healing. That's what's so shocking. Jesus could have healed the leper just by waving his hand. He didn't have to touch him. Or he could have done it the way Elisha did with Naaman. Hey, listen, I know the Jordan River's kind of dirty, but I want you to go down there and I want you to dip 7 times. And when you come out on the 7th time, man, your skin's going to be just like that of a brand new baby. It's just going to be wonderful. He could have healed him like that, but he didn't. You see, Jesus does something unnecessary to the healing of the man's leprosy, but something that was absolutely necessary to heal the man's heart. He touched him. He didn't have to. How long? How long? How long had it been since this man had someone touch him? How long has it been since he's been able to be home to kiss his wife or hug his kids? How many years had it been? How long before someone just gave that human-to-human touch? Not only was leprosy a physical death sentence of walking around, it was emotionally dehumanizing. And the healing of this man's leprosy was almost secondary to Jesus, to healing his heart. What was unnecessary to the man's physical well-being was absolutely necessary to heal the man's emotional and spiritual well-being. He was no longer almost a person. He was a person. Jesus, that touch was an invitation to the leper to come back to the human race. Jesus spoke to the man, and immediately the leprosy was gone. The man was healed not by Jesus' touch, but by Jesus' word, which followed after the touch. The ceremonially unclean man was restored by Jesus, and he is the sinless one. He is the only one who is ceremonially pure. I mean, he is the picture of ceremonial pureness, is Jesus. Jesus' words would have provided relief from the leprosy, but his touch provided relief from the leper's loneliness. Jesus provided so much more than what the man even originally came and asked for. He gave this leper what he truly needed, a restored place back at humanity's table. But like real stories in life, not everything works out like it's supposed to. This leper actually demonstrates a lost opportunity. Listen to these verses. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning. See that you don't tell this to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for you for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places, yet the people still came to him from everywhere. Jesus gave a very strong command, which this former leper did not obey. Jesus told him, don't tell anybody. I want you to go to a priest, and I want you to offer the sacrifice. Which priest? Maybe the exact same one that years earlier had said, you have leprosy, and took everything away. And as God took Miriam's leprosy away, Jesus takes this man's leprosy away. Jesus has done what only God can do. And in Leviticus 14, there's all kinds of details as to this sacrifice, and few Old Testament sacrifices are described in such detail as this of a former leper offering this sacrifice. This sacrifice of this once former leper that he is supposed to offer is a picture of the sacrifice that Jesus has made for you and me. He has purified us and cleansed us from our sin by removing that shame, by removing that curse, by removing that unforgiveness, that anger towards us because of our sin. Jesus' sacrifice did all that. We were covered in leprosy. It's called sin. Now, the former leper's actions, aren't they understandable? I mean, I can understand why he did what he did, but what happened when he chose to not obey Jesus is his failure to present himself to the priest as instructed by Jesus was actually a lost opportunity to reveal that God was in the flesh and he was right here. And the priesthood needed to know that. And so it shows a lost opportunity. Now, there's a life lesson in this for all of us. There's a reversal of position, so to speak. You see, Jesus told the leper, don't tell anyone, and he told everyone. And you and I are told to tell everyone, to go out into all the world, but so often we tell no one. What's wrong with us? We have the miracle worker. He's purified us. He's cleansed us. He's given us eternal life. He's given us hope. He's given us love. He's given us our family. He's healed us. He's helped us, and we tell no one. What is wrong with us? We have permission. We've been commanded. We've been commissioned. Go into all the world and be the light, be the salt. Let it out. That's who we are called to be. The former leper's actions caused Jesus to trade places with the leper. You see, the leper is welcomed back into community, and Jesus has to seek the solitude of the wilderness. But a day of rescue was upon the people, and it was captured in the heart of an untouchable who had been touched by the heart that touches. And if we're going to grow a heart like Jesus, we're going to need to touch others in the same context. So what's our step of faith? Because we're all about faith steps here at the Cove. I want to encourage you this week to touch someone. Now listen, I don't expect to get a call from the jail trying to bail you out because you did not listen to the context. But I want you to touch someone emotionally, relationally, spiritually this week like Jesus. I want you to bring someone back who may be on the edge, who may be right there teetering on the edge of loneliness, who thinks that they are not loved, that they are unlovable, that they have just messed up too bad, that there's no way that anybody is left in the world that will love them. I want you to bring them back. Encourage them to step back from that ledge, and you demonstrate love to them. You reach out, you touch them in a way, and you let them know, not only do you love them, but that Jesus loves them. It's got a high calling and a high purpose attached to their lives, that it's not over yet, that God still has a plan. I want to encourage you to do that. Now, that person may be sitting at your house right now. That person may be sitting in your home right now that you need to touch. Maybe it's a total stranger, but can you imagine if all of us here in this room, all of us that are watching online, if we were to take the time this week and pray that God, please give me the opportunity to touch the person that needs to be touched. I may know them, I may not know them. I'm going to wait, I'm going to look, I'm going to watch for my opportunity. Can you imagine what would happen in our community of St. John's and Duval if we reached out as a church to the people in our worlds, what would happen and the change that would be brought about? It would be amazing. Because if we're going to have a heart like Jesus has, we've got to reach out and touch. Not be afraid. I know there's a lot of fear in our world. Some people play a game, well, Jesus touched the leper because if he got leprosy, he could just heal himself. Listen, man, don't play preacher games with me. I get it. I'm not telling you to be dumb and, not to follow common sense. I'm just encouraging you to step out a little bit. Maybe it's an encouraging word. Maybe it's a arm on the shoulder. Maybe it's a letter or an email, phone call. Maybe it's, doesn't matter anymore. All is forgiven. Welcome home. Maybe it's one of those. Won't you do that this week for the glory of God? Someone's waiting to be touched.